Okay, well, again, thank you so much for coming. This is a real pleasure for me. And for those of you who have come to a presentation of mine before, welcome back. I have some new material in this Sam Jones presentation, which should make it kind of interesting. Much appreciation to the library and to the North Adams Historical Society. Also, since our I want to acknowledge the Adams Historical Society as well. The photographs that you see on the wall are in the possession, in the collection of the Adams Historical Society, and those photographs are here thanks to Eugene's generosity and retrieving them. He's part of the story. So thank you very much. Okay, so what are we going to do tonight? The Arnold Print Works. I know that this room is full of historians, so I'm going to cover some material that you may be familiar with. But if you're not, I'm going to try to be very brief with some of the history. The Arnold Print Works originally started in the early 1860s by the, surprise, surprise, the Arnold brothers. And very soon after that, the buildings that they built burnt down. And then several years later, in the 1870s, the business was reincorporated. And at that time, A.C. Houghton and my great-grandfather, Arthur Gallup, became partners in the new operation. So I'm not going to cover the very early years because I covered that with the Arthur Gallup book. Sam Jones was a local North Adams boy. He grew up, well, now I'm looking at orientation, on River Street. I can't figure out where River Street is, over there, in North Adams. And so I'm going to talk about his life and the Arnold Print Works, specifically from around 1915 until 1942, when the business, as it was known for almost 80 years, liquidated. And the reason why it liquidated was because the advent of World War II, the government requisitioned all cloth for the war effort. So there was literally no cloth available to print. The Arnold Print Works, with 2 divisions, tried really hard, made several trips to Washington, D.C., trying to get some contracts in the war effort. They were not successful. And Sam Jones, the director at the time, liquidated the business. The big picture, as you probably know, is that the Marshall Street complex, which is now Mass MoCA, but for 40 plus years, it was Sprague Electric. And Sprague Electric bought the complex from my grandfather, Sam Jones, in 1942. They had already been in operation in North Adams, but they were expanding, and it worked out perfectly for them because their business took advantage of the electrical components that were needed for the war. So for Sprague Electric, it was a good moment. For Arnold Print Works, it was the end of a chapter. So here we go. Sam Jones, he happens to be my grandfather, and I'm named after him. I tell the story because I think it's very sweet, a nice connection for me personally. Dr. Jones died in 1954, 3 months after I was born. And my mother tells the story that holding me was one of the last things he did. So I kind of have this wonderful connection with him. So here we go. This photograph is in circulation in a bunch of places. The very first Arnold Print Works building. I'm just doing a quick little history for you. So Sam Jones, he has a very interesting story. I will admit that I'm biased. I'm his grandson. But I'm honestly very, very pleased to tell this story because Sam Jones's mother was an Irish immigrant. She came to this country sometime in the late 1860s with her 4 sisters, mother and father, and 4 sisters. So if you can imagine what it might have been like for a mom and dad to bring their 5 young daughters from Ireland to America, there's no doubt that they didn't have much money. They landed here. I can trace them starting in 1870 because of the US Census. Fantastic document. They first appear in 1870, and by 1880, they are living in North Adams. Now, North Adams at that time, as you just saw, the Arnold Print Works was now a going business. And there were, as most of you know, a number of very successful mills, cotton mills, in the region at that time. And there's no doubt in my mind that the family located to North Adams because of the employment opportunities for the 5 daughters. It was one of the few jobs that a young woman could do. And they landed in North Adams. Interestingly, very likely working in one of the mills that was owned by the Arnold Print Works. Sam was a local boy. He went to Drury High School. He was a president of his class. He was quite an accomplished young man. By the age of 17, he was already working at the National Bank in North Adams. He has a long list of accomplishments of what he did in school. I include this picture. It's the youngest picture I have of Sam. He was an altar boy at St. John's. I always mix this up. What was a church before it was All Saints? St. John's. Thank you very much. For some reason, I get St. Paul's in my mind. It's St. John's Church. He was very, very devoted to the church. He was a member of a guild at the church that was the membership of this guild, St. Andrew's Guild, was young men and young boys and men working together through the church to do good work in the community. As an interesting little side note, because these are the fun things you discover when you do this homework, I found an article in the newspaper that said that Sam Jones was going to Boston to attend the Episcopal Conference. And who did he go to Boston with? None other than Arthur Gallup. Arthur Gallup, at the time, was a treasurer of Arnold Print Works and a very influential man. Turns out Sam Jones married Arthur Gallup's daughter. They were high school sweethearts. They knew each other at church. And the really interesting thing to me is that Arthur Gallup was a treasurer of a business that employed upwards to 3,000 employees. He was a very serious, dedicated businessman. And I just imagine how difficult it would be to earn his daughter's hand in marriage. Sam Jones was that guy. So here he is in a young man. I think he's about 21 years old in this picture. If any of you have ever done any research about your family genealogy, I suspect many of you have, it's a really fascinating thing to do. I'm really lucky in this subject matter because the Arnold Print Works, being the largest employer in North Adams and a very successful manufacturing company in a town that had a number of successful manufacturing companies, the Arnold Print Works and the owners of the Arnold Print Works were covered quite extensively in the North Adams transcript. So I have access to all this fantastic material about the subject of my books and Sam Jones. It's so much easier these days. When we were younger, You'd go to the library, and if you're as old as I am, you'd go to a card catalog and start searching. Well, now it's much easier. You can search every newspaper in the country and for topics, and I read over 500 articles on the Arnold Printworks, all published in the North Adams transcript. A great historical record. Quick pictures of Sam, just to get a little sense of him. This is Sam he's about early 40s in this picture. That happens to be my mother. Sweet picture. In this picture, he had owned the Arnold Printworks for a couple of years. And here he is as an older man. So I'm giving you just a little sampling of what he looked like. So again, I've got so many cool photographs and images of the Arnold Printworks I wanted to just include if you hadn't seen these before. This is an illustrated map of the Arnold Printworks. Here's the river. This is the front entrance where the two stone pillars are right now. So you'd come down Marshall Street across the river and enter Arnold Printworks right here, which is pretty much still an entranceway. I guess it's not the official entranceway now, but this was 1883. The business, as it was reincorporated, had been in business now for about 8 years. I love this image. It comes from the collection of my family. Again, here's Marshall Street. This is the era of horse and buggies. Here's the little APW entrance. It's so cool that it's still that way, so you can have an orientation of what it looks like. An early postcard of the same entrance. Arnold Printworks, in the first part of their existence, also owned a number of mills. And in fact, the Arnold Printworks was called Arnold Printworks and Mills, because it's important to understand the distinction that the cotton mills created the cloth from the raw bales of cotton and did the multiple steps to weave this cloth into wonderful rolls of cotton that were then used by what was referred to as the print works, Arnold Printworks. It was the printing operation of the textile industry. And Arnold Printworks owned a number of mills in the region, and they continued to own these mills right up until 1908, when there was a huge financial crisis in the country. Credit was cut off to most businesses, and Arnold Printworks, which went through bankruptcy a number of times in its 80-year history, but in 1907, when Arthur Gallup was treasurer and A.C. Houghton was president, the company went into receivership. And part of the incredible financial deal that Arthur Gallup, the treasurer, made to save the company financially was it included selling off the mills. The mills were then privately owned and continued basically in the same operation that they did before, but then Arnold Printworks owned the mills. At that point on, the mills were owned by someone else, and they sold the fabric to Arnold Printworks. So I call him a local boy with big dreams. He literally lived across the river from Arnold Printworks on River Street. And he happens to be an academically gifted man. I know this And as I'll explain a little bit further on, he was admitted to MIT as a high school senior from Drury. He did not end up going to MIT because he married Arthur Gallup's daughter, Dorothy Frances Gallup, and that changed his entire life. Just fun things that I happen to have. This is his 1905 yearbook. Just an absolute treasure to me, because if you are trying to research somebody, there's nothing better than having a high school yearbook. Why? Because you get these great pictures. And here's Sam Jones. He was the editor of the yearbook. Here he is right here. And this is the real gem, is how Sam Jones was described by his peers. And I'm not sure I'm going to stay on this slide enough for you to read all of it, but there's a couple things that I want to bring to your attention. They say two things here that were very prescient, very held up, and very true about Sam Jones's life. Work never bothered Sam. And boy, when you see what I'm about to tell you, you'll understand that he was a hard worker. Also, Sam Jones says that he believes in getting all the good out of life and helping others to do the same. And I think that that's a very beautiful thing, and I think that his life bore that high school idea out. So here he is. This is a house on River Street. His mom was widowed at a very young age. So Sam was brought up by a widowed mother. She ran this house, which still basically looks just like this, although this picture I think is probably from the 80s or 90s. I can't remember. My brother took this picture. She ran a boarding house, and that's how she survived. She ran this boarding house, and with Sam as her only child. So here's Dorothy Gallup, Arthur Gallup's second daughter. Just as a quick little point of detail, Arthur Gallup, who is so important to the story of Arnold Print Works, he had a 56-year career there. Arthur Gallup's first wife very sadly died when she was just 30 years old. She had 2 children with Arthur in that first marriage. This is her second daughter. And so I am a descendant of Arthur's first wife. He married again and had another child that survived in his second wife. But Sam Jones married Dorothy Gallup. And Arthur Gallup, who was a treasurer of Arnold Print Works, became his father-in-law. I think it's very interesting. These are just little historical gems that I really enjoy. Arthur had lost his wife. So Dorothy had a father and no mother. Sam Jones had lost his father. He had a mother and no father. I think that there is little connection there, and particularly in that Sam Jones referred to Arthur Gallup, and I know this because I have his letters, he referred to Arthur Gallup as father. And in fact, he very wisely put his entire career in the hands of Arthur Gallup, his father-in-law. Great move. I sort of say, there's no question that he had a leg up by marrying Arthur Gallup's daughter. On the other hand, just that alone would not have ensured what was about to happen in this guy's life. I love this image together, Sam Jones and his wife Dorothy. I can't be absolutely sure, but I'm pretty sure that this picture is right around the time that they got married. She was a junior in high school and he had just graduated. They were 16 and 17 years old. Pretty young. But I'm pretty sure that looks like an engagement ring to me. So I'm thinking that it's a wedding portrait. This is Arthur Gallup. Those of you who frequent the library would recognize that this painting is in the children's wing of the library right now. Why? Because Arthur Gallup donated the children's wing to the North Adams Public Library. It's a very sad but not unusual thing that Arthur, in his first marriage, he and his wife, Harriet, had 6 children. Only 2 survived. In Arthur's second marriage to Florence Houghton, the daughter of his business partner, they kept it in the family for a bunch of reasons. Florence and Arthur had 5 children in their second marriage, and only 1 child lived. He had 8 children die before the age of 12. Such a tragedy. It just breaks my heart to think about it. So, Sam Jones, he graduates from high school, and he's a very ambitious guy. He immediately embarks on this plan, no doubt in collaboration with Arthur Gallup and with support of Arthur Gallup, because Sam Jones, remember, his mom was an Irish immigrant. They were not a wealthy family. They were an immigrant family, and Sam Jones took advantage, I think, of his father-in-law's guidance very wisely. The two of them came up with a plan to give Sam a world-class training that would prepare him to eventually work at the Arnold Printworks. Very smart plan. Sam Jones and his wife get on this exact ship. Why would I know that? Because I have a letter that Dorothy Jones wrote home, which was on the stationery of the boat that they were on. And it was the President Grant. So I know exactly what boat they took to go to Europe. They went to Europe because Sam had studied German, and at the time he was interested in studying chemistry. And in the early 19th century, Germany was the center of knowledge for sciences. So Sam Jones takes his young wife. He's only 19 years old. She's 18. They go across the ocean. They eventually land in Germany, first in Berlin, where he continues to study the German language, because it was written very clearly in his correspondence that if you were going to be a chemical engineer, if you're studying chemistry, you had to learn German, because that was the language of chemistry. While Sam Jones and his young wife, Dorothy, were living in Germany, they had 2 children. This is Florence, their first child. She was born in Germany. And this is Edward, their second child. Now, I'm pretty sure, I don't have this exactly documented, but it was implied in an article in the North Adams transcript that Dorothy, I know she had Florence in Germany, but I think that Dorothy actually came home and had Edward here in North Adams, because in his obituary it says he was born in North Adams. Then she returned back to Germany. Sam, I said he was academically gifted. Why do I think that? Again, if you are a historian who does research, I would not make a statement like that unless I had pretty specific information supporting it. He got his doctorate in chemistry in Switzerland at age 21, and he wrote his doctorate in the German language. He's just a young immigrant kid that lived on River Street. So he got his doctorate, and through connections to the school that he was studying with, he was offered a job in Moscow. So in 1910, Sam Jones and his wife, Dorothy, and their 2 children moved to Moscow. I have a lot of correspondence that he wrote in Moscow, and it is fascinating. If you can imagine Moscow in 1910, think about our history here a little bit. You're only 5 years from World War I breaking out, and only a couple years later, the end of the Tsars. So Sam happens to live with his young family in Moscow for 5 years between 1910 and 1915. And at the outbreak of World War I, he returns home. Obviously, it's no longer safe to be in Russia. But I would suggest to you, and I can't imagine that I'm too far off, that Sam Jones was likely one of the first Americans to understand and know the declaration of World War I, because he was living in Moscow. He wrote a letter to his wife saying, not to his wife, to his mother, saying he's pretty sure he knows everyone in Moscow who speaks English. Pretty cool. This is a letter of his that he wrote when he was in Moscow. I think it's kind of interesting. It's a long story, but I'll make it very brief. At the outbreak of the war, he was tasked by his employer. He worked for a textile printing company in Moscow. And World War I starts, and he gets sent by his employer all over Europe to procure the chemicals and the necessary supplies to keep that printing company in operation, to sort of stave off the closing of the company due to war. The story that he writes, and he writes it in like 8 different letters, of traveling from Moscow to St. Petersburg, to Sweden, to Norway, and all over Europe, eventually landing in England, is a fascinating story in and of itself, because the war had been declared and it was not really safe. There was a very clear danger in him taking this trip. When he eventually gets back to North Adams, he gave a number of lectures about this trip that he took to get chemistry for his employer in Moscow. The North Adams transcript covers those presentations really quite extensively, and I think it's quite a nice little historical gift for me that here I am in North Adams also giving a presentation about him and telling the story that he told when he was a young man coming back to North Adams. Sam Jones comes back. He buys the Chase estate, which most of you probably know, Chase Hill, the long storied history of the Chase estate. I don't have time to talk about it that much, but I'm pretty sure that Sam Jones bought the Chase estate, if not directly from Chase himself. There couldn't have been too many other owners in between. And this is a Chase estate as it exists right now. This is a house that Sam and Dorothy bought. My mother was born and grew up in this house. This other house over here, part of the estate. There were actually 4 homes, a stable, and extensive gardens. At the time, there were no trees on Chase estate, and his house overlooked the Arnold Print Works. So now they're home. They've come back to North Adams. He writes that if Arthur, his father, agrees, he will start at the Arnold Print Works as a chemist. He has a doctorate, and from that point on, he is always known by Dr. Jones. I'm very confident it was the plan all along for him to do this, because I can't imagine Arthur Gallup did anything by accident. I think it was a plan. He was incredibly well prepared to start at the Arnold Print Works as a chemist in 1915. When he returns, he and Dorothy have 2 more children. This is his daughter Anna, and Anna's lovely daughter Debbie, who's here tonight. Very thrilled about that. This is my mom in her wedding photograph. So they have 2 other children. 2 children born in Europe, then 2 children back in North Adams when they get home. His 2 first children, by the way, learned Russian. Interesting. So now he's home. He starts working at APW as a chemist. He is under Arthur Gallup's guidance. Arthur was clearly his mentor. While Sam, in the first few years, starts working for the Arnold Print Works, remembering he has a doctorate in chemistry, he is awarded a number of patents on the inventions of the chemical process of printing on different fabrics. So he's a very successful chemist for Arnold Print Works. I know you guys know these buildings quite well, but just as a little reminder of how huge this complex is. So Arthur goes to work for the Arnold Print Works in 1915. He is, again, rapidly advances to become an assistant manager at the plant. And by 1926, Arthur Gallup, remembering he had a 56-year career at the Arnold Print Works, when he retired, he was both treasurer and president of the organization. Quite remarkable. Arthur retires in 1926. The company is up for sale. And the North Adams transcript writes about this quite a bit. The community is very nervous. As you can imagine, the company, the great company, 26 buildings, 3,000 employees, a huge payroll, was in local ownership. And Sam Jones, again, I have no direct evidence about this, but I have no doubt in sort of collaboration with Arthur, puts together a financial package and successfully purchases the business. He's 39 years old. Quite amazing.
Sam?
Yes?
Was Houghton the stakeholder at that time, or who did he buy it from?
Great question. Okay, so A.C. Houghton, which many of you, probably in North Adams, you know A.C. Houghton very well. He was directly involved in getting this building donated to the town as a library. He was North Adams' first mayor. It's a long story, but the very short of it is A.C. Houghton dies in 1914. At that point, Arthur Gallup becomes the president, and he buys out the Houghton interest. A very good investment. Just because this is a matter of public record, but I think it's interesting, and I suspect you will all agree that it's interesting. The town really liked to know about the owners of the Arnold Print Works. They were very wealthy. And when Arthur Gallup died, he retires in 1926. He goes on this wonderful trip to Europe with his wife, and he actually falls ill and dies in Paris. 1929. The North Adams transcript lists his estate worth, in today's money, about $30 million. Back. So Sam Jones, as soon as he buys the Arnold Print Works, he very immediately takes advantage of this business opportunity. The Renfrew manufacturing company in Adams, Massachusetts. Had been in business for quite a long time. They were a mill. They wove fabrics. They did not print. They were well known for weaving gingham fabrics, nationally regarded in that way. But Renfrew goes out of business around 1927, right after Sam Jones buys the Arnold Printworks. And Sam Jones, enterprising young man that he is, buys the Renfrew Manufacturing Company at an auction. He then goes about this is a fascinating story. And Lord knows, I wish that I could talk longer. I'm going to try to keep this to an hour. But Renfrew, at that time, was totally oriented to weaving fabric. Sam Jones guts the entire plant. And together with George Burnside Flood, who is also works for Arthur Gallup, he redesigns, reverses the entire flow of the operation at Renfrew, and creates what he called the Jones division of Arnold Printworks. That redesign of that building, completely stripped, all new systems, new water flow. It's a really interesting story, covered extensively in the North Adams transcript. Was nationally lauded by engineers as the most modern printing plant in the country. So here we are. This is the Marshall Street complex at the time, starting in 1928. There is the Arnold division of Arnold Printworks in North Adams, and the Jones division in Adams. I've got these great illustrations, and I found them because I bought a letterhead from the Arnold Printworks from 1940. And these were the two engravings of the two plants. I had never seen this particular illustration before, but it's pretty cool. Imagine, now Sam Jones is running both of these plants. I throw this little picture in for you guys, a little sense of what North Adams looked like during Sam Jones's time. You recognize where this picture is. So Sam Jones, now owner of the Arnold Printworks, grew up in North Adams, but he decides to move his family to Williamstown. And he bought this estate in Williamstown. It's on Bulkley Street in Williamstown. If you ever travel around in Williamstown and go down Bulkley Street, this house is still there. It looks a little bit different from this house, but it was quite a grand estate. This is what it looks like now. They put this round turret onto the house sometimes afterwards. But Sam clearly liked nice houses. And he and his wife, Dorothy, owned this house for almost 40 years. This is where he raises, at this point, his older children were now in college. His daughter, Anna, and particularly my mother. My mother was the late child. Anna, I think, was 8 years older than my mother. My mother basically grew up in this house. I throw this in because it's a beautiful photograph. That's my mom. This is in the Great Depression. She was riding horses as an equestrian, just to give you a little sense of how comfortable the Joneses were at that time. So here's Sam Jones in the back porch of his house. He now in owning the Jones division and the Arnold Printworks division in North Adams, the Jones division very quickly specializes in printing draperies, but not exclusively. They do a lot of different things. I don't have time to go into all of them, but they not only do they print their own designs, but they actually refer to themselves as jobbers. They accept the artwork from companies all over the world to print. So they printed their own designs and printed the designs of companies nationally and all over the world. I have records of company in Germany doing business with Sam Jones and sending him orders. During the time span of the Arnold Printworks, starting all the way back to 1876, right up to 1942, they printed over 69,000 different patterns. And in 1905, in the brochure that they create, they describe that they have the capacity to produce 330 miles of cloth every single week. Just to give you a sense of the scale of what was done here. Arnold Printworks provides my grandfather with a full-time chauffeur. Now, if he was just going to North Adams from Williamstown, you'd think maybe that's not that big a deal. But it's also a really interesting thing to remember or to know that Arnold Printworks, right from the very beginning, had offices in New York and Paris. The offices in Paris were specifically so that they can keep a sense of what the fashion was in Europe. And the offices in New York were their sales offices and also the offices of their the artists that designed patterns for the Arnold Printworks. So Sam Jones and Arthur Gallup, for that matter, actually commuted to New York City quite a lot. He would go with this chauffeur, his name was Hammond, take him to New York City. Hammond stayed down in New York City to be available for Dr. Jones at any time to drive him. And then on Friday, he'd drive back to Williamstown. This is a nice photograph. Jim found this photograph and shared it with me. I love it because it actually has some identifying information. 1938. The chemistry laboratory. Now look at that photograph and look at how so very basic the chemistry was at that time. And I would argue that probably a challenging time for the pure pursuit of science. No computers, obviously, but these were the chemists at Arnold Printworks in 1938. Now, since we're at 1938, it's a good time for me to then tell you about the Arnold Printworks throughout the Great Depression, largely the 1930s. In 1937, the Arnold Printworks goes through bankruptcy again at the height of the Great Depression. And Dr. Jones, and this is perhaps the most remarkable story of his career, he had kept both plants in operation throughout all the 1930s. And it's a really sweet, interesting note. I'm devoted to the North Adams Historical Society's Facebook page, which is fantastic, by the way. And just a couple days ago, when I was writing on this Facebook page, someone wrote and said that his mother was a Depression-era child, and his mother told the story that his family was better off than most families because they had work at the Arnold Print Works. When most other businesses went bankrupt or were not employing people in the 1930s, it was the Great Depression. Sam Jones keeps both plants in operation for the entire time. But in 1937, for various reasons, they go through a bankruptcy process, and Sam Jones applies for and receives a multi-million-dollar, $5 million loan. At the time, it was $5 million, probably the equivalent of $60 or $70 million today. Applies for a loan to keep the business afloat. But he does not take the loan. He single-handedly brought this business out of bankruptcy and returned it to profitability in 1939. He doesn't even take the loan. He finances it entirely on the income of APW. The North Adams transcript calls it close to a miracle, and the subtitle of my books, which is an epic of American industrialism, that is a phrase that I take from the North Adams transcript. They describe this particular chapter of Dr. Jones saving the business as an epic of American industrialism because they posit, I don't know how true this is, but the North Adams transcript says, never before in the history of industry in America has a business of this scale gone out of bankruptcy without taking any kind of loan to do it. They wrote that it was unprecedented. This is a great quote. I'm going to give you a second to read it. I love these photographs. Please take a second to look at these photographs. They're really, really interesting, and they're very rare because we don't have a lot of photographs of what the interior of the operation of Arnold Print Works actually looks like. But these photographs all come from a 1940 scrapbook that was saved at the Jones division of Arnold Print Works in Adams. I'm very quickly going to scoot through. Yes, sir.
There was a gentleman named Claremont that worked at the Jones division in Adams.
Yep.
He took a lot of photographs before.
Really?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to his granddaughter. She was up in Adams. So I wanted to see if I could get a hold of a photograph that he took of my father-in-law when he was working in the roller printing division.
Very cool. Well,
they may have all kinds of negatives in the photographs.
okay, well, before you leave, I want to connect with you because if that happens, I want to know about it. It was a big effort. You can imagine, I looked high and low for photographs to support these two books. And I was lucky because I had a lot of family photographs, but I didn't have a ton of family photographs. And photographs of the plant, as I just said, are fairly rare. That doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that I couldn't find them. I'm going to quickly just go through, these are fabrics printed by the Arnold Print Works. I'm including them because I know for sure they were printed at the Arnold Print Works. But again, remember, drop in the bucket, 69,000 different patterns.
Who designed them?
Pardon me?
Who's the designer?
They had their own staff. I have a photograph in the book of 12 designers that were their Arnold Print Work employees. They worked out of New York City, and they designed the majority of the designs that Arnold Print Works printed. Again, they printed designs from other people too. Here's something that's worth noting as you look at these patterns. Every color here is printed as a separate mixed ink, which is not how it's done these days. Today, only 4 colors are used to create all colors. It's the same process that's used to print color photographs. But in this time, every single color was printed as a separate roller with a separate mixed color. And the printing machines that they had were enormous, up to 14 different colors on 14 different huge rollers, all in one printing machine. And the fabric rolls through, and as each roller touches the fabric, it imprints a separate color. And when it comes out on the other side, the design is complete. Okay, Sam, he's running out of time. Yeah.
Do you have any photographs of Grandma Moses' paintings that they printed at the times of use?
I don't, but the Adams Historical Society has a wonderful example of that.
I have some at home.
Very cool.
Dad worked there.
Really cool.
How old Grandma Moses in the color shop?
Yeah. They printed Grandma Moses illustrations at the Adams division. It's a really fun story. This is another nice quote. I think that it is a clear sign of Sam Jones's business ability that he ran these businesses throughout the Great Depression without compromising the quality of Arnold products. They were regarded as a world leader in quality printed textiles. And somehow, and I think that the answer is through a large scale, they printed more volume, they did not compromise on quality, and throughout the Depression they were able to sell the fabric at a competitive price while the quality was superior to their competitors. This is an example of the letterhead that I bought this letterhead. Who knew that people collect such things? I think I paid $100 for it. But what a fantastic artifact, because it tells us exactly how Arnold Printworks described themselves in 1940. Bleachers, dyers, printers, and finishers of fine textiles. It was a very complex operation. Okay, so I've already described this. 1942, Sam Jones very reluctantly liquidates the company, and this quote of Sam's is in the newspaper. We had built up an organization that was the finest of its kind in the country. Imagine how heartbreaking that was when the war broke out. Again, just to wrap up what happens to the businesses, the complex in North Adams gets sold to Sprague Electric. The complex in Adams is sold to the Aspinall Corporation, and it continues on as a textile printing company all the way up through early 1980s. They had a hard time of it, particularly in the 60s and 70s. They struggled. They did not make money. Eventually, they went out of business. And as you can imagine, at this time, printing textiles in New England mostly had moved south for lots of different reasons. And as history of industry shows, the South had these businesses for a while, but now these industries all are done in another country. So the movement of industry to follow the least expensive operation continued on, and it's the world we have now. Yeah.
There was a company just south of Worcester, Mass, Cranston Printworks.
Yep.
The Rockefeller family some of the people that I could go with, 2 decades ago, bought the company. They have a plant in Cranston, Rhode Island, and the one in the small town, I think, the name, just south of Worcester.
Nice.
I believe it might be still operating at this day.
Okay. Well, at this time in America, we produced the material that we consumed. And I think that it's a very interesting reflection on the history of the world, really, is that, in my humble opinion, these guys had it right. Local ownership, manufacturing using local employees who lived in the community. And now we've lost a great deal of that in America, and I think we're kind of sad to see that. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation today. A lot of interesting overview. So I'm going to add 4 kind of comments or chapters that were missing in your talk.
Okay, briefly.
One, of course, is the cotton didn't come from the sky. The cotton came from Mississippi slave plantations. And that story needs to be told because we thrived on that piece of the back.
No question.
The second is child workers were manipulated in the families here in a very strong way. The third is, you mentioned about St. Petersburg, Russia. There was a very successful Arnold Printwork doll store in St. Petersburg. And that was like one of the most successful in Europe at that time.
Nice, yes.
And then the last thing is the Adams Works that was bought by Berkshire Hathaway.
That's right.
Yeah. So those are just 4 books.
All really wonderful points. I don't have time to go into all the different things, but I will certainly acknowledge that this was a messy industry. It was dangerous in the early days, particularly. They did employ children. The work environment was often not safe. They were discharging chemicals into the Hoosick River. Famous story that many of you may know, the story of a woman who has this great quote that she thought Wednesdays were her most favorite day of the week because the Hoosick River ran red on Wednesdays. I read that it was actually a common belief at the time that the movement of the water purified the chemicals that were in it. We know that's not true. But that's why the plants were built on rivers, not just for the power, because in the early days they used steam power, but because it was a convenient way to discharge their waste. So that's a whole conversation. I'm not trying to make light of it. But that was part of the industry, no doubt. So just very quickly now, Sam Jones, 1942, he retires. He sells the business. And he and his wife, Dorothy, retire to Florida, largely. They own a beautiful home in Daytona Beach. They keep their house in Bulkley Street in Williamstown. But Sam, very quickly after selling this business, makes a number of very interesting and important community donations. The war is broken out, and as this image here suggests, Sam Jones makes one of the largest single donations to the Red Cross in the nation. Also, both Arthur Gallup and Sam Jones, big supporters of the local hospital. And Sam Jones makes a contribution, $5,000 at the time, equivalent to about $100,000 to the local hospital. This is really important, and I really would like to emphasize this. Sam Jones was an academic. He really, really was a student who worked so hard, and he grew up in North Adams and went to Drury High School. He establishes a scholarship for local high school boys, right? to study the print trades and funds this scholarship through Arnold Printworks. And the North Adam Transcript writes this wonderful article about it. And as, well, this quote doesn't quite do it justice. It suggests that this was a precedent that had never been done before, where industry established scholarships for local students to study in preparation to be skilled to start work at Arnold Printworks. And Sam Jones creates this scholarship. I'm very sorry for women at the time. This was a patriarchal age. Men largely were in charge. But as I have in the book, and I think is also great to note, many, many women worked at the Arnold Printworks. Here's Sam Jones. He has a stroke 1 year after he retires. And it was obviously not completely debilitating, but he refers to this time as a time of impairment. Fortunately, Sam Jones has the money. He hires this woman, Edith Kasuli. She was a local physical therapist, as a full-time caregiver. He installed an elevator in his house on Bulkley Street in Williamstown because he used a wheelchair. Here's Daytona Beach, where he retires. Here's Sam at his house in Daytona Beach. I desperately tried to find other photographs from this house because I remember one in my childhood. It was a huge villa. You know, Sam grew up as a poor child of an immigrant. In the process of studying, he studied for 9 years in Europe before he returned to America, worked so hard at Arnold Printworks, and was a very successful man. I think that the lesson of the story that is important is this was a time when local people created industry, employed local businesses, and many businesses in North Adams were successful because of the success of Arnold Printworks. The machine tool die industry was huge in North Adams. Why? Because of all the machines that were required to do this process, whenever they broke, they used a local business to make the part. I think that this was a formula that clearly benefited North Adams. North Adams essentially grew up around this industry.
You mentioned also that the girls actually got paid $1 more than the boys did.
Say it again.
The girls got paid $8 a week, and the boys got paid $7.
Really? Well, that's so interesting. I love that.
The reason they did that, according to the occupation, was the girls had nimbler fingers and could break, tie knots on
In the mills. That doesn't surprise me. That's great. Thank you for letting me know that. All right, well, good. Women did not get paid equally in most of the country for that, for maybe even right up till today. So it's very cool to hear that. Here's Dr. Jones and his wife, Dorothy, in Florida. You see he's got his cane. The pictures you take of him now are he's seated. Here's Dorothy. She's in her 50s in this picture. Oh, that was this is the house. Not bad. I love this photograph because it's so indicative of the times. Fast forward to mid-1950s. I remember as a boy that style that women had of wearing, an actual mink around their necks. And I was horrified. Little mink heads and little mink Pause.
Open and close the mouth on those.
Oh, it's. But here's Dorothy. So at this point, this is my brother Steve. Also interesting to note, both Dorothy and Sam were lifelong smokers. This is a year after her husband Sam dies in 1954. And this picture was taken very shortly thereafter. This is Edith Kasuli, Sam's physical therapist, stayed on as a full-time, generally referred to as a companion to Mrs. Jones for the rest of her life. And I will say that, that Edith was so important to the family that she was in Sam's will, gave her quite a bit of money, and the house in Florida was given to her as well. She was just so important to the family. I remember her as a little boy. She was a lot of fun, and again, stayed on with Mrs. Jones. Quick postscript. This is the Arnold Printworks Jones Division building that survived a great fire. And this is I think it was actually referred to as the Arnold Printworks toward the end. It changed names a little bit. Was it, Jane?
It was Arnold Printworks from the 60s to the 80s, and then it became Adams Printworks.
Adams Printworks. Yeah. They had a big fire. This is the building that survived. And it was abandoned for a decade before it was this building was eventually torn down. These are photographs taken documenting the building when it was empty. The paper called this the Great Conflagration, when most of the plant in Adams burnt. What year was that? 1984. Yeah, 1984. And I end tonight, and thank you very much for your patience. We've run pretty close to 1 hour. I'm going to take a second and ask you to just read this quote, because I think that this is the lasting quote I'd like you to remember for Sam Jones. I will read it. Thank you for saying that. All right, here we go. This is in the North Adams transcript. This is describing how Sam Jones saved the company from bankruptcy in 1938. Here we go. To those who fought shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Jones throughout the whole nerve-wracking, nerve-shattering succession of events, the resulting success of surviving bankruptcy has been nothing short of miraculous. The chief reason for this success has been the dynamic personality and spirit of the president, who refused to take the easy way out for himself. From first to last, he met the crucial test of a responsibility that extended far beyond the limitations of the business concerned, the Arnold Printworks, and virtually affected the lives and fortunes of thousands of local families having no direct connection with the Arnold Printworks itself. I think that this is a remarkable achievement. And this is the North Adams transcript's description of Dr. Jones. And at that, I'm done. Thank you very much. It's now 12 after 7. I'm going to say that if you have a question, I'm going to hang out for a few minutes, but not too many minutes, because poor Ryan has been working all day long and we can't stay here forever. But if you have a question, please come up and ask me. Take a look at the fabrics. If you didn't get a little note card, that's my gift to you. Thank you very much for coming. Okay.